All right, it is 100 degrees in the garage. Humidity is through the roof. Perfect time to do a truck project. So we're gonna dive into this one. In today's video, we're gonna be installing the 80D truck bed support brackets. These are for the 2021 and newer F-150 Raptors. I bought mine from Apollo Off-Road. Part number is AC1902501. I'll put it down below and I'll leave a link to this guy down in the description as well. So don't feel like you gotta write that down. Anyway, there's a bunch of options for bed supports out there that fit these trucks. They're all mount about the same. You could pay anywhere from $150 for some cheap eBay brackets. I paid, I think, just over $230, $240 for these guys. Or you could spend some big bucks on some billet aluminum ones that look awesome. Kibitech and SVC make amazing brackets. They look really cool. I just felt like if I could spend, you know, around $200 for a bracket that's going to do the same thing as a $500, I can't justify that differential. Anyways, we're going to be installing these guys today. What you will see is that guy's installed, because one of the trickiest parts of this installation is the truck bed bolt. My truck is only 3 years, and when I went to loosen this guy up just to make the video smoother, I ended up cracking the nut below there. So underneath that nut there, or underneath that bolt there, you have what's called a cage nut, I believe. And what happens is these two little cheap welds that hold it into the bracket end up cracking over time because they rust out. So these are also considered one-time use bolts, because when you install them, you torque it to yield and you're actually cutting threads when you install that bolt. So I would highly recommend going out and getting yourself an extra bolt per side as well as a nut. I would not try to reuse the nut on each side if you can get everything free. Also, in the kit, you get 3 bolts per side. So all black hardware washer, this fat washer goes on the inside, and then you got a nylon lock nut. The reason you get 3 is because one will go up top, one goes in the bottom corner. Those correspond with these holes here. And then you can drill a 3rd hole on the bottom that'll be about right here. I did not do that on that side. Not a lot of kits require you to drill it. I don't think that's super necessary. And I think you're gonna get the same amount of rigidity even without drilling that hole as you do, you know, with it drilled. So as far as tools, you're gonna need a Torx T50 bit. This is gonna help you get that bed bolt out. I would recommend using hand tools. Don't try to use an impact wrench on there. That's just too much power for that. Definitely a for sure way of stripping out either the bolt or stripping out the nut. And we'll hop underneath the truck and I'll show you how little room there is to get to that nut. So, you know, use the right tools here. Also a massive hex head, because we're gonna need to tighten this hardware down with the hex head tool. You're gonna need a 6mm socket, because in order to get those bolts installed in the inside of the truck bed wall here, we gotta remove the taillight, and that requires 2 6mm bolts be removed. I would also have a pry bar ready, because if you are gonna end up stripping that, and I've heard a lot of folks stripping the nut on the bottom, it's helpful to get an 18mm wrench, put it on the cage nut, and then go up underneath and use a pry bar to push the wrench onto the nut. That way you're getting a lot of force on there. And again, I'll hop underneath the truck when we get there. I'll show you where that one is underneath. But for now, let's dive into the installation. I'll show you what a good install looks like, and then we'll hop underneath and I'll show you kind of some of the monkeying around I had to do in order to get that one free, because some of you may be here not necessarily because you're interested in bed supports, but you might be interested in how I removed a bed bolt that was spinning, which is basically what was happening to me. Real quick public service announcement before I get into the install. The reason this one's installed is because, again, I was spinning that bed bolt and I had to get a second set of hands. So I went to upper management, my dad, which reminds me, give your dad a call right now, thank him. A lot of us, our dads taught us how to work on these trucks. So, you know, give him a call, check in on him, let him know, you know, you're here, you're working on a truck, and you appreciate everything he did for you. But anyway, let's get back to the install. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do before we remove any sort of taillights or any of the bolts in here is we're gonna get that guy free. And like I said, I already broke that one free. I sprayed it with Croil for a few days before I even worked on it, just to make sure that everything was nice and smooth to get off, so I didn't have to fight with it like I did on the driver's side. But again, it's a Torx T50 bit, and then just loosen it up. Like so. All right, once you get that guy loosened, perfect, we're happy because we didn't strip anything. Now what we can do is take our 6mm socket and wrench and go right here, and we're gonna loosen up the taillights. And the reason we need to do this is because we have to pull the taillights off in order to get behind, so we could thread those bolts in over there. All right, so we get those guys off, simple. Just pull this guy straight out, undo the wiring harness, and we'll set that taillight aside so we don't break it. Now, next thing we're gonna do is hop up underneath, and I'm gonna show you what the other side of that nut looks like, and then we'll start with reinstallation. All right, so here is the factory cage nut that I just removed that was attached to the bolt underneath the bed bolt here. Here is the new one. Now what you'll see is I ended up bending these wings up. That way this thing basically slides into a channel, and I'll show you up underneath where it goes in. But essentially, here's the hole. Here is the cage nut. This portion, this flat portion here, faces the rear of the vehicle, and you gotta push it up behind the chassis and then through, and it'll basically slide into this little channel and hold itself into place. The reason it holds itself into place is because of these little wings here. The other thing that I went ahead and did is I threaded this guy. So I put the nut into a vise, and then I went ahead and sent this bolt through it. That way I could cut the thread so it's a little bit easier to get everything on there. Last thing I'm gonna do before I fully install this is I'm gonna hit this guy with anti-seize. So later on, if I ever do need to remove this, let's say we do a bed rack or anything like that one, it's a lot easier and I'm not dealing with a rusted nut or rusted bolt, because nobody likes rusty nuts. All right, so we're on the passenger side, and I'm glad I'm filming this side because there's a lot more wires on the driver's side and it's harder to see. So basically, this is the rear portion. Here's the tailpipe. Here is the hitch. So if you just go straight up, that's where the bed bolt's installed. It's behind this bracket right here, behind this metal plate. So this little nut here needs to go into this channel right there, and then it needs to push up against the top of the bottom of the bed, and then it's gonna slide into a little channel in here. You could feel the channel from the back side here. The problem is this only goes in one way, so it's gonna go in this way. It cannot go in this way. So that elbow end, or that flat end, faces the rear of your vehicle. So this is gonna require two hands. Gonna be near impossible to install with a camera in my hand, but basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slide it up into there with my hands the best I can, and then try to monkey this guy right into place. Once you get it into place, it'll hold it, and then we'll go up top and I'll put the bracket in place and drop the bolt through this just to hold it so it doesn't slide out. All right, good news. The bolt is installed. You can see right there. What's awesome is I drop this guy down and he goes right into the nut just like that. So we're good. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna coat this guy in anti-seize, get the bracket put into place, drop that guy in and start tightening him up, and then we'll come back and tighten these guys up. As far as order, I don't think there's a right or wrong order other than don't do that one don't do that one first. So what I typically do is I'm gonna do this bottom corner one, tighten this guy all the way down, then we'll tighten this guy, come back and tighten this guy, and then we are done. And we'll take a look at the final product and then shut this one down. All right, let's get everything installed. Let's first hit this guy with some anti-seize. Ew. Goopy. All right. Hate this crap. It's a mess, but it really does help a lot. All right, let's get this guy where he needs to go. About there. All right. Now let's tighten this guy down so he doesn't move. Then what we'll do is get our hardware here. So we're gonna go bolt, washer, fat washer, and then nut on the back side of it. So get one guy here, and there's tons of room to work inside here. And this is a 19mm nut, and let me see what size hex head that is. And a 5/16 hex head. So let me get my 19mm, which is over here. All right, let me get that guy started. So that's there. Get our last one. Again, bolt, washer, fat washer, nut. Guy through there. Make sure everything's straight. Don't want crooked brackets. Get that guy in there. I am sweating like a pig right now. Holy cow, it's hot. I am really hot, but the show must go on. All right. Let's get our nut in there. It is helpful because since I'm sweating, and this is kind of a tight spot for my hands, the sweat acts like a grease and lets me get my hands into places I probably would not normally have been able to get them into. All right, that guy's tight. I don't think there's a torque spec on these guys, but I tighten them good and tight. It seems to work on the other side. All right, now the last thing we're gonna do is tighten this guy down, and I believe the torque specs are like 59 foot-pounds, so I'll get the torque wrench out in a bit. I just wanna get this guy seated all the way down. But then that is it. Really not a lot, considering everything else is like 100 plus foot-pounds, but whatever. I'll trust Ford. Get in there. There we go. While I'm at it, let me check the other side. All right, so the bed brackets are fully installed. So I went with the ADD brackets for a number of reasons. One, price. You really can't beat these things. 200, 250 bucks, mid 200 for bed brackets. Awesome, works out well. Second thing is it really does not prohibit you from using the whole bed space. Some of the other ones where it's just a bracket here to there, it does definitely cut into some of the usability of the truck. And then the third reason is this really does give you some additional tie down locations here. So you got some holes cut in here. You can use straps, tie whatever you want down there. Outside of this bed bolt right here spinning on me, it was a very easy project. Could probably knock it out in about an hour, assuming those bed bolts come out. Best thing you could do ahead of your install is just hit those underneath with some Croil to start breaking up some of that rust. And like I said, avoid using power impact tools. I really feel like that's what leads to those case nuts underneath breaking. Use hand tools so you can just kind of gently break things free with a breaker bar. That's the way to go in my opinion. Again, I will leave a link to these guys, which I picked up from Apollo Off-Road, and then these guys, which I picked up from my local Ford dealership. And then you should be off to the races with your installation. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments below. And the last thing I will say before we shut this one down is reach out to whoever taught you to work on trucks, or whoever taught you everything you know about trucks or cars or whatever, your buddy, your you know, your uncle, your grandpa, whoever taught you to do the things that we do on our trucks. Reach out to them and let them know that you appreciate it. I was reminded of that when I was working on this bed bolt, just how much I appreciate everything my dad taught me for working on trucks. And with that said, we will shut this one down. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it. See you in the next one.